The sun rose over the sprawling campus of the United States Naval Academy, painting the brick facades of the historic buildings in golden light. Cadets shuffled in tight formations across the parade grounds, boots clicking rhythmically against the pavement. The air was crisp, the kind that carried both excitement and anxiety, the scent of ambition mixed with sweat and polished leather. Among them, whispers floated like unseen currents. "Did you hear? There's a new instructor." Lieutenant Commander Sarah Kane approached the academy gates with a quiet determination. Unlike the other instructors, she didn't wear a face of forced authority or attempt to command respect through volume. Instead, she moved with a measured, deliberate confidence that drew eyes without effort. She was tall, athletic, her posture impeccable, but there was something more subtle about her presence, a stillness that radiated danger. Cadets turned their heads, some curious, some skeptical, but none could look away. Sarah had spent the better part of a decade in places most people refused to. Imagine Afghanistan, Iraq, classified operations in remote corners of the globe where the difference between life and death was measured in milliseconds. Her reputation as one of the few female Navy SEALs to complete the grueling GUD-S program preceded her, though few cadets truly understood what that entailed. For them, she was an enigma, a story whispered in awe and occasionally disbelief. Inside, Sarah carried no illusions. She didn't seek admiration, nor did she crave authority. She sought compliance, discipline, and the development of cadets who might one day face the same horrors she had endured. And she understood something they did not. Arrogance is a far deadlier enemy than any gun. Cadet Marcus Harlan, 19 and brimming with confidence, was among the first to notice her. He was the natural leader of his small group of cadets, his ego carefully cultivated through academic success and physical prowess. Marcus had a sharp mind and strong instincts, but like many young men entering the academy, he underestimated the world outside its walls, and most of all, the people who had survived it. "She's short," one of Marcus's friends whispered as they watched Sarah stride past. "I thought SEALs were bigger than that." "Size doesn't matter," Marcus replied dismissively, though a flicker of doubt passed over his features. "It's all hype." They followed her movements with curiosity and a little disdain, convinced that the legend was just that, a story meant to intimidate the weak. Yet even in that brief observation, Sarah noticed. She had learned long ago how to read people in microseconds, discerning intent through posture, breath, and subtle gestures. These cadets were testing her. They had no idea how high the stakes were for someone like her. As Sarah entered the training hall, the cadets scattered, some instinctively straightening their posture, others leaning casually against walls, arms folded. Her voice, calm yet firm, filled the room. "Good morning, cadets," she said. No introduction, no flourish, just a statement of fact. "I am Lieutenant Commander Sarah Kane. I will be your instructor for this term. Listen carefully, follow directions precisely, and you may leave this room with something more than pride. Ignore me, and you will learn, the hard way, that mistakes here carry consequences far beyond this academy." A murmur rippled through the room. The tone wasn't threatening, exactly, but it carried an authority that didn't need to be justified. Marcus scoffed quietly, convinced she was bluffing. "We've got this," he muttered to his friends. Sarah's eyes flicked toward him. "Confidence is good. Overconfidence can be fatal. Remember the difference." She didn't elaborate. No one survived the kind of situations she had faced by speaking in hypotheticals. After introductions, the cadets were led outside for drills. Sarah observed silently as they ran obstacle courses, carried heavy loads, and executed combat simulations. While many instructors might shout over the noise, she stayed back, watching, calculating. The sweat, the exhaustion, The minor mistakes, they were all revealing. Every cadet displayed something about themselves in those moments. Arrogance, fear, resilience, hesitation. Sarah filed each observation away, mentally noting who might have potential and who would need closer guidance. During a break, Marcus pulled a few of his friends aside. "Watch this," he said. "Let's see if she's as tough as they say. I bet she won't even flinch if we push back." The group chuckled, sharing whispered plans to subtly undermine her authority. Nothing harmful, just enough to make her hesitate, enough to see if she was human. But Sarah, always aware, noticed the glances, the stifled laughs, and the whispers. She allowed them to underestimate her. That was the key. The real lesson would come later, when their arrogance collided with reality. After lunch, the cadets were called to the armory for weapons training. Sarah followed, maintaining her composed demeanor, her mind quietly assessing the group. Marcus's eyes lingered on her again, a mix of disbelief and curiosity. He had already decided she was out of place, yet something about the way she moved made him uneasy. Something primal and instinctive. "Today," Sarah began as the cadets gathered around, "you will learn the importance of respect for the weapon in your hands and the lives it affects. This isn't a game. This isn't an academic exercise. Mistakes with a firearm are fatal. Treat every piece of metal as though it has a mind of its own, because one day it will." The cadets nodded, though some exchanged amused glances. Marcus whispered under his breath, "She's serious. But is she scary enough to enforce it?" Sarah heard. She didn't react, not yet. Let them underestimate her. It would make their lessons much more effective when the time came. As the day ended, Sarah watched the cadets march off in formation, their youthful bravado intact. Marcus lingered slightly behind, eyes narrowing, already plotting the subtle rebellion he and his friends could attempt. But Sarah's gaze lingered on him too, calm, assessing, patient. She had seen countless soldiers like him, brimming with confidence, eager to test limits. They all learned the same lesson eventually. Sometimes it came with humiliation. Sometimes it came with pain. Sometimes it came with the terrifying realization that someone else had been through worse and survived. And Sarah Kane always survived. As the academy gates closed behind the departing cadets, a faint smile touched her lips. The stage was set. The players were in position. And the first act of this story, a test of arrogance, discipline, and patience, was about to begin. Because in the world she came from, and in the world she now taught, no one learned the hard lessons of life without a teacher willing to push them to the edge, and sometimes beyond. The sun had barely risen over the Naval Academy grounds when Sarah Kane returned to the training field. Today, she would lead a more advanced exercise: weapon handling under stress, situational awareness, and tactical decision-making. The cadets assembled, chattering quietly, trying to mask their nerves with bravado. Marcus Harlan's group, in particular, seemed determined to test her authority. They had already dismissed her in their minds, calling her all talk, and they were eager to see if she could back up the reputation that preceded her. Sarah didn't rush to issue orders. She walked among the cadets, observing their posture, their hands, the subtle flicks of the eyes that betrayed nerves, impatience, or arrogance. Her movements were deliberate, almost meditative, as if every step were calculated, every glance meant to measure their intentions. Marcus noticed, unconsciously straightening, yet a smirk played at his lips. "She thinks she's untouchable," he muttered to one of his friends. "Let's remind her she's just an instructor." The first part of the exercise was simple: target drills, movement, and observation under pressure. Sarah handed out weapons, demonstrating the correct handling of each one, but her explanations went beyond mechanics. She spoke of consequences, discipline, and awareness, lessons not found in any manual. Every action has a reaction, she said, her voice low but commanding. A misstep in judgment and cost a life, your own or someone else's. Remember that. The cadets nodded politely, some feigning interest while whispering jokes behind her back. Marcus caught her glance at him once, and he looked away quickly. He didn't want to admit that her stare made his stomach tighten in a way he hadn't anticipated. After the initial drills, Sarah decided to raise the stakes. She instructed the cadets to perform a simulated tactical scenario, entering a hostile environment, identifying threats, and making decisions on the fly. Marcus's group, confident and eager, decided to exploit the exercise to challenge her authority. "Let's see if she flinches," Marcus whispered to his friends. "We'll make it fun." The cadets' plan was reckless in the best-case scenario and potentially disastrous in reality, but they didn't see it that way. They had trained for years in controlled exercises, and nothing had prepared them for someone who had seen combat in real war zones. Sarah, as always, was fully aware of their intentions. She didn't react. Let them underestimate her. The lesson would hit harder that way. The scenario began. Cadets moved through the simulated environment, weapons in hand, communicating silently, tactically clearing rooms, and identifying threats. Marcus and his crew stayed back slightly, waiting for the moment to humiliate the instructor, convinced that she would falter under pressure. But Sarah moved with fluid precision, observing each group, correcting minor mistakes, guiding cadets with words that were calm yet sharp. She didn't shout. She didn't force compliance. Instead, she projected an unshakable confidence that made her authority undeniable. As Marcus's group prepared their prank, a subtle maneuver to point a training pistol at her and test her reaction, Sarah noticed the shift in their body language. Their stance changed, their movements became jerky, eyes flicking to her for confirmation, for reaction. She recognized it instantly. The moment they believed they could intimidate her was the exact moment they exposed themselves. Hours passed with tension building silently. The cadets followed orders, but whispers continued, glances exchanged, laughter muffled under breaths. Marcus's ego demanded proof that Sarah was human, that she could be shaken or embarrassed. What he didn't anticipate was how patient she could be. She had learned the hard way that waiting, observing, and letting others overcommit was often more effective than immediate action. During a brief break, Marcus tried to rally his friends. "She's just an instructor," he said confidently. "We've trained longer than she has. We're going to show her who's in charge." One of his friends hesitated, sensing the danger. "Are you sure?" "She's different. Look at her." Marcus waved him off. "Relax. It's just a little fun. She flinch, we'll laugh. End of story." Sarah, listening quietly from a distance, filed away every word. She didn't scold. She didn't confront. Instead, she planned. Patience was her ally, and arrogance was the cadets' weakness. The afternoon drills grew more challenging. Cadets navigated obstacle courses while carrying simulated ammunition, negotiating physical barriers, and responding to auditory and visual cues. Sarah observed the smallest errors, noting not only technical skill but mindset. Marcus's group moved carelessly, their attention divided between the exercise and their planned stunt. When the moment arrived, a quiet corridor, minimal supervision, Marcus raised the training pistol. He aimed it at Sarah, intending to startle her, maybe even provoke a reaction that would humiliate her in front of the others. For a moment, everything seemed frozen. The other cadets held their breath, uncertain whether to intervene or wait. But Sarah didn't flinch. She didn't react. She simply moved. In a single fluid motion honed from years of combat experience, she stepped forward, grabbed his wrist, and twisted, forcing the gun from his hands. Marcus stumbled, fell to the ground, and the weapon clattered across the floor. Time seemed to freeze. Whispers and murmurs filled the room. Sarah stood over Marcus, calm and unyielding. Her voice was quiet, but every cadet in the room could hear it. "Rule 1, she said, her eyes locked on him. "Never point a weapon at someone unless you are ready to meet the consequences." The message was simple and deadly clear. Marcus, humiliated and shaken, didn't respond. He couldn't. He had been outmatched, outclassed, and outhought, all in a matter of seconds. His friends looked on, wide-eyed, suddenly aware that the legend they had mocked was very real, and far more capable than any of them had imagined. After the incident, the cadets regrouped under Sarah's guidance. The exercise continued, but the dynamic had shifted. Marcus's arrogance had been tempered by reality, and the subtle undercurrent of respect began to replace his earlier contempt. Sarah's point had been made without raising her voice, without escalating violence, yet the lesson would resonate far longer than any shouting or punishment ever could. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Sarah sat quietly in her office, reviewing notes from the day. She thought about Marcus and his friends, their potential, their arrogance, their vulnerabilities. She knew the challenges ahead would test them further. Some would falter, some would rise, and only those willing to embrace discipline, humility, and resilience would survive not just the academy, but the world beyond its gates. Outside, the cadets walked back to their quarters, the weight of the day settling on their shoulders. Marcus's mind raced. He replayed every second, every gesture, every look Sarah had given him. Something inside him had shifted. The instructor he thought he could intimidate had exposed the flaws in his ego and taught him the first real lesson of his career. He didn't yet understand the depth of her experience, the battles she had survived, or the personal loss that had forged her into the woman standing silently behind him. But he felt the gravity of it. And deep down, he knew this was only the beginning. Because in Sarah Kane's world, every test carried meaning. Every lesson came with consequences. And she had already begun teaching the cadets why you never ever underestimate a Navy SEAL. Night had fallen over the Naval Academy, blanketing the training grounds in deep shadows. The air was thick with anticipation and mischief. Most cadets had retired to their barracks, but Marcus Harlan and his small group lingered near the weapons storage area. They had waited for hours, whispering strategies and suppressing nervous laughter. Their plan was simple, a harmless prank to teach the instructor a lesson and cement their dominance over her. At least, that was what they thought. The training pistol Marcus held in his hands was loaded with blanks, but it looked real enough to intimidate anyone. He glanced at his friends, who nodded with both excitement and apprehension. "She flinch." "She has to," Marcus whispered, smirking. "Everyone flinches." Sarah Kane, however, was not everyone. She had been through firefights in environments where hesitation meant death. She had stared down armed enemies in the deserts of Afghanistan, navigated hostile urban combat zones in Iraq, and survived ambushes that would have shattered lesser soldiers. She had learned the lethal power of patience and observation, qualities Marcus and his friends had yet to understand. From her position near the training hall, she saw them moving, their nervous energy poorly concealed. She didn't speak. She didn't confront them. Instead, she calculated. Every muscle in her body was alert, every sense tuned to the slightest irregularity. By now, she knew their intent, and she would let them expose themselves fully before intervening. Marcus crept forward, gun raised, heart pounding. The thrill of the prank coursed through him, adrenaline masking his fear. "She won't see this coming," he muttered. "She can't." He stepped closer. Sarah was facing away, adjusting her notes at a nearby table. One of his friends whispered, "Wait, is she moving? Is she listening?" But it was too late to retreat. Marcus raised the pistol and pressed it against her head, his finger brushing the trigger with feigned confidence. Silence. For a heartbeat, the world seemed to freeze. Marcus expected her to scream, to flinch, to break under the threat. But Sarah didn't move. Her posture was relaxed, her breathing steady, her eyes calm. She could feel every muscle in his body tense. She could read his fear, arrogance, and impatience all at once. In a blur of motion, Sarah acted. Her hands shot up with precision that defied the slow-motion perception of time. She grabbed Marcus's wrist, twisting it in a way that disarmed him instantly. The training pistol flew across the concrete floor, clattering loudly in the quiet night. Marcus stumbled, crashing to the ground, shocked and helpless. His friends froze, faces pale, realizing their plan had catastrophically failed. Sarah's voice, low and steady, cut through the tension like a blade. "Rule 1, she said, standing over him, eyes locked with his. Never point a weapon at someone unless you're ready to face the consequences." The words hung in the air, weighty and final. Marcus's smugness evaporated, replaced by a mix of fear, shame, and disbelief. He had underestimated her, and now he understood, viscerally, the error of his arrogance. One of his friends stepped forward, stammering an apology, but Sarah's gaze silenced him instantly. "Stay where you are," she said, her voice calm yet commanding. "This isn't about punishment. This is about understanding. You need to comprehend that mistakes in judgment carry consequences, often far heavier than you expect." Marcus lay on the ground, heart hammering, mind racing. He had imagined pranks, embarrassment, maybe a sharp rebuke, but nothing prepared him for this. Sarah Kane didn't just react. She anticipated, neutralized, and dominated without a single unnecessary move. She was a force refined by hardship, loss, and rigorous training. The other cadets, summoned by the noise, arrived on the scene. Whispers spread quickly. "Did she just... she took him down? How is that possible?" Sarah's reputation transformed instantly. She was no longer an instructor. She was a living legend. A force to be respected, feared, and studied. After ensuring the immediate threat was neutralized, Sarah addressed Marcus directly, her eyes unyielding. "You need to understand something, Marcus. Life is not a game, and arrogance is deadly. You pointed a weapon at someone who has faced real danger, and you were lucky it wasn't worse. Remember this moment." Marcus swallowed hard, unable to respond immediately. His pride was wounded, his ego bruised, but deeper than that was a profound respect, mixed with fear. He realized that Sarah's strength was not just in physical skill, but in her ability to control herself and her environment. She had mastered patience, observation, and timing, qualities that Marcus had not yet begun to comprehend. The scene lingered in the minds of every cadet present. Whispers and speculation spread through the academy in hours. Sarah Kane was not just an instructor. She was a force of nature. Some students were intimidated, some inspired, and some, like Marcus, were humiliated. But humiliation, Sarah knew, could be a tool as powerful as any rifle or combat tactic if the lesson was internalized correctly. Later, in the privacy of her office, Sarah reviewed the day's events. She didn't gloat, didn't write disciplinary notes immediately. She reflected, as she always did, on the human tendencies that led to this moment: arrogance, overconfidence, underestimation, and distraction. She had seen these traits destroy teams in combat zones, and now she had seen them nearly destroy a group of cadets at the academy. For Marcus, the lesson began to take root slowly. He replayed every second, every detail, every expression on Sarah's face. Her calm, unshakable demeanor contrasted sharply with his own panic and uncertainty. He had expected resistance, but not mastery. He had expected embarrassment, but not absolute dominance. He had underestimated her, and that mistake would not be forgotten. By the end of the night, the academy grounds were quiet again, but the echo of the incident lingered. Marcus lay awake in his bunk, mind racing. He had learned, in the most visceral way possible, that Sarah Kane was not a woman to be trifled with. Not because of her rank, or even her SEAL training, but because of her experience, her composure, and the calculated precision of her actions. In the coming days, whispers of the incident would circulate through every corner of the academy. Cadets would speak of her with a mixture of awe and fear. Some would attempt to challenge her, only to realize she had already mastered patience and strategy. Marcus, however, carried the lesson deeper than most, a humbling realization that arrogance could be fatal, and respect was not optional. Sarah, meanwhile, continued her work with quiet diligence. She knew the next phase of the lesson was just beginning. Marcus's pride, bruised though it was, could still be guided. He could learn discipline, humility, and real leadership, or he could resist and risk further failure. That choice, as always, would be his to make. But one thing was certain. No cadet, regardless of ego or bravado, would ever forget the night when a Navy SEAL calmly turned a reckless prank into a lesson about life, death, and respect. And in the quiet moments, when Marcus replayed the incident in his mind, he understood the truth of the title that would soon follow him through the academy. You never cross a Navy SEAL. The next morning, the Naval Academy hummed with the kind of low, uneasy energy that follows a shock. Cadets whispered in corners, eyes darting toward the training grounds where the incident had occurred the night before. Marcus Harlan moved through the halls with a heavy step, his usual swagger replaced by the weight of humiliation. The echoes of Sarah Kane's calm, authoritative words replayed in his mind over and over. Never point a weapon at someone unless you're ready to face the consequences. Rumors spread fast. Some cadets embellished the story, describing her disarming Marcus in one fluid motion, as if she were superhuman. Others were more measured, still shaken by the sheer composure she exhibited. "Did you see it?" one cadet whispered. "She didn't flinch at all, not even a blink." Another nodded, muttering, "It's like she saw everything before it even happened." Marcus found himself increasingly isolated. His friends avoided eye contact, embarrassed by their role in the prank. Some offered awkward apologies, but he waved them off, lost in his own turmoil. The incident had stripped away his confidence, leaving him exposed in a way he had never experienced. He had always believed strength came from skill, leadership, and bravado. Sarah Kane had taught him, in seconds, that real strength came from discipline, experience, and self-control. By mid-morning, the commandant had called an emergency meeting with Sarah and the cadet leadership. The academy was technically responsible for the prank, even though it had been carried out during unsupervised moments, and everyone was anxious about potential disciplinary action. Marcus expected severe punishment. He anticipated confinement, demerit points, or even expulsion. The commandant looked grim, glancing at Marcus before turning to Sarah. "Lieutenant Commander Kane," he began, "your handling of the incident, while effective, raises questions about the severity of the disciplinary response. We need your recommendation." Sarah's calm gaze swept the room. "Sir," she said, her voice measured, "Marcus Harlan is not inherently dangerous. He is reckless, yes, but not malicious. The mistake he made was serious, and he must understand the gravity of it. But this is not a matter of punishment alone. It is a matter of education and accountability. Expulsion would serve little purpose. He needs guidance, not destruction." The commandant arched an eyebrow. "You are suggesting mentorship instead of penalty?" Sarah nodded. "Yes, he must learn discipline, responsibility, and respect. I can provide that guidance. I see potential in him if he is willing to accept the lesson." The room fell silent. This was unexpected. Many cadets had assumed that any direct challenge to authority, especially one as blatant as a weapon pointed at an instructor, would end in severe punishment. But Sarah Kane operated on a different philosophy. She had survived countless operations, witnessing deaths that could have been prevented by proper leadership and humility. Mercy was not weakness. It was a tool for those willing to learn. Marcus sat quietly in the back of the room, absorbing every word. Confusion, guilt, and relief warred within him. He had expected humiliation at the hands of the academy, but instead, he was being given a chance, a rare opportunity to redeem himself under the tutelage of someone he now recognized as extraordinary. The realization was overwhelming. In the days that followed, Sarah began to implement a structured mentorship program with Marcus. She paired him with smaller, one-on-one training sessions designed to test his endurance, mental acuity, and capacity for humility. At first, Marcus resisted. His ego bristled at the notion of being singled out. But Sarah's methodical, patient approach left no room for argument. Every mistake was corrected, every lapse in judgment highlighted, but never with malice. The lessons were precise, deliberate, and unforgettable. The other cadets watched quietly. Some admired her. Some feared her. Others still whispered, unwilling to admit the truth. Sarah Kane was not just a SEAL. She was a living testament to what discipline and experience could achieve. Stories of her past, real combat missions, ambushes, and near-death experiences began circulating, each detail amplified by awe and fascination. Yet no one truly knew the full extent of her trials, including the personal loss that drove her. Sarah's own history was only hinted at in fragments. During training, she occasionally referred to her late brother, also a SEAL, who had been killed during a mission gone wrong. Her words were deliberate, leaving space for the cadets to fill in the rest with their imagination. The weight of that loss was visible in subtle moments. The quiet pause before she spoke, the tightened grip when demonstrating a maneuver, the unflinching gaze during high-stress exercises. For those who paid attention, it became clear that her strength was forged not only through training, but through profound personal sacrifice. Marcus, now under her direct guidance, began to see the depth of the woman he had challenged. He noticed the precision in her movements, the unshakable calm under pressure, and the quiet authority she wielded without needing to raise her voice. Slowly, the initial feelings of humiliation gave way to awe and respect. Marcus began to understand that Sarah's ability to disarm him, both physically and mentally, was not simply skill, but the product of a lifetime of discipline, loss, and relentless perseverance. One afternoon, after a grueling session that left him exhausted and bruised, Marcus finally broke the silence. "Why did you spare me?" he asked, voice rough. "You could have crushed me back there. You could have made me pay." Sarah looked at him for a long moment, expression unreadable. "Because you have potential," she said finally. "I've seen men like you before. Cocky, reckless, full of bravado. Most never learn. Some die because of it. I'm giving you the chance to learn before it's too late." Marcus didn't respond immediately. He simply nodded, absorbing the weight of her words. For the first time, he realized that respect wasn't something demanded. It was earned. And Sarah Kane had already earned his, whether he liked it or not. Meanwhile, the academy itself was shifting subtly. Whispers of the incident had reached other instructors and cadets, altering perceptions. The prank that had begun as a joke now served as a cautionary tale. Sarah's reputation grew, and with it, a quiet reverence. The cadets who had once mocked her now watched her with a mix of fear and admiration. They understood, in ways Marcus had only just begun to grasp, that crossing a Navy SEAL, even one who appeared calm, composed, and unassuming, carried consequences far beyond their imagination. Marcus's own journey was just beginning. The humility he had been forced to confront, the lessons he was beginning to internalize, and the respect he now felt for Sarah would shape the remainder of his time at the academy. Every drill, every instruction, and every moment of guidance became more than a lesson in skill. It became a lesson in character, discipline, and survival. By the end of the week, Marcus had changed. Not completely, not yet, but enough for Sarah to notice. He moved with greater caution, listened more than he spoke, and considered the consequences of his actions in ways he hadn't before. The prank, intended as a moment of dominance, had instead become a catalyst for transformation. And Sarah Kane, quietly observing from the sidelines, allowed him to take ownership of that change. She understood that true learning could not be forced. It had to be earned through reflection, humility, and the realization of one's own vulnerabilities. As the sun set over the academy, Marcus stood alone on the training grounds, replaying the events of the past few days in his mind. He could still feel the adrenaline from the night of the incident, still hear Sarah's quiet but commanding voice. And for the first time, he truly understood what it meant to respect someone, not for their title, their rank, or even their reputation, but for the depth of their experience, the precision of their actions, and the quiet strength they carried in every gesture. He didn't yet know the full extent of the lessons Sarah Kane would teach him, but he understood one truth clearly. Crossing a Navy SEAL, even one who appeared calm and human, was a mistake he would never repeat. And for Sarah Kane, the fallout was not about punishment or recognition. It was about the lesson, about the moment when arrogance meets experience, and humility is born from consequence. In the end, she knew, the cadets would either rise to the challenge or falter. The choice was theirs. But Marcus Harlan, the young man who had thought himself untouchable, had already taken the first step toward understanding that real strength is measured not by bravado, but by patience, discipline, and the courage to learn. The morning fog clung to the Naval Academy grounds as Lieutenant Commander Sarah Kane arrived at the field. Marcus Harlan was already there, standing stiffly, awaiting instruction. The night of the gun incident had left a lasting impression, and although his pride had been bruised, curiosity and a newfound respect stirred within him. He had seen a glimpse of Sarah's world, a world governed by discipline, precision, and the consequences of misjudgment, and he wanted, though he would not yet admit it aloud, to understand it fully. Sarah didn't waste time on pleasantries. "Today, Marcus," she said, her tone calm but firm, "we start the process of correcting your approach to leadership, judgment, and personal responsibility. You may think this is punishment, but it's not. It's preparation. One day, your decisions may determine life or death, not just for yourself, but for others." Marcus swallowed hard. He knew she was right. He had gone through drills and obstacle courses, yet nothing had demanded the mental and emotional awareness that Sarah now demanded. For hours, she guided him through tactical exercises that pushed him physically and mentally. He ran obstacle courses while carrying weighted packs, navigated simulated combat environments, and engaged in rapid response drills that tested his reflexes and judgment under stress. But Sarah's lessons were never purely physical. With every movement, she demanded reflection. "Why did you hesitate there?" she asked, watching him clear a narrow passageway. "What was your thought process? What assumptions did you make? How could you have handled it differently?" Marcus, panting and exhausted, realized that skill alone was insufficient. He had been confident in his strength, his speed, his technical knowledge, but Sarah Kane had taught him that awareness, patience, and foresight were the true marks of a leader. A single misjudgment in the field could cost a life. After a particularly grueling set of drills, Sarah took Marcus aside. The shadows of the afternoon stretched across the field as she spoke quietly, almost conversationally. "When I was your age," she began, "I thought strength alone was enough. I thought courage meant rushing in, facing fear head-on. I learned otherwise, painfully. One of my closest friends, my brother, died because of mistakes that could have been avoided if he had respected the weight of his decisions. I cannot bring him back. I can, however, teach you to survive, to protect others, to understand the responsibility you carry the moment you hold a weapon." Marcus listened, silent, absorbing the gravity of her words. Her calm tone masked the pain beneath, the experiences that had hardened her resolve. He realized for the first time that Sarah's authority didn't come from her training or her reputation alone. It came from loss, from living through consequences that few could imagine. The afternoon passed in a blur of exercises, each designed to challenge Marcus, not only physically, but mentally. Sarah had him run drills, simulating enemy engagement, force him to make split-second decisions under stress, and then question every choice afterward. He was exhausted, both in body and mind, but for the first time, he began to see the logic in her method. Mistakes were not punished for humiliation. They were dissected for growth. During a particularly intense scenario, Marcus hesitated while clearing a simulated room. A target popped up unexpectedly, and he froze, unsure how to proceed. Sarah didn't intervene immediately. She let him struggle for a moment, watching his decision-making process. Then, quietly, she guided him through the proper response, emphasizing observation, patience, and precision. "Notice the cues you missed," she said softly. "Every detail matters. Every movement tells a story. You cannot afford to guess in life or combat. You must read the situation, anticipate outcomes, and act decisively. Hesitation or arrogance can kill." Marcus felt a mix of frustration and enlightenment. He had never considered the depth of perception required to lead effectively. Strength, he realized, was meaningless without awareness. As the day drew to a close, Sarah introduced a new element to the lesson: endurance under psychological stress. She simulated unexpected emergencies, cadets injured, alarms blaring, false threats appearing from different directions. Marcus had to respond, adapt, and make split-second decisions, all while being monitored for both accuracy and composure. During one simulation, a fellow cadet fell during a mock combat scenario. Marcus froze initially, unsure whether to continue the exercise or attempt a rescue. Sarah stepped beside him, whispering, "Decide. Hesitation has consequences. Evaluate quickly. Act decisively." Marcus rushed to aid the cadet, recalling her guidance. He assessed the environment, acted decisively, and successfully completed the simulated rescue. As he straightened, sweat dripping, heart hammering, Sarah's calm voice cut through the tension. "Well done. You did not hesitate. You acted with awareness and purpose. That is progress." Afterward, she led Marcus to the edge of the training grounds. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. For a moment, the grueling training paused. Sarah turned to him, her expression unreadable, but her eyes intense. "You will make mistakes," she said. "You will misjudge situations. But every mistake must be understood and corrected. That is the difference between a cadet and a leader, between a soldier and a survivor. Remember the lesson of the gun incident. Your arrogance nearly cost you your credibility, maybe worse. Never forget it." Marcus nodded slowly, feeling the weight of her words sink in. Respect was not given. It was earned through discipline, patience, and the willingness to face discomfort and failure head-on. As the twilight deepened, Sarah shared more of her own history, hinting at missions in hostile territory, ambushes, and operations that demanded split-second decision-making. She spoke sparingly, letting the implications hang in the air. Marcus and the other cadets listened in awe, recognizing for the first time the depth of her experience. She was not simply an instructor. She was a living embodiment of the lessons she taught. That night, Marcus lay awake in the barracks, replaying the day's exercises and the weight of Sarah's words. He thought about the decisions he had made, the mistakes he had nearly repeated, and the actions he had taken under pressure. For the first time, he realized that survival, leadership, and respect were not abstract concepts. They were lessons to be internalized through discipline, reflection, and courage. Sarah Kane had begun transforming him, not through punishment, but through rigor, patience, and uncompromising standards. He understood now that the gun incident was not merely an embarrassing failure. It was the beginning of his education in leadership, responsibility, and the unflinching reality of consequence. By the end of the week, Marcus's transformation was subtle but undeniable. He moved with purpose, listened more than he spoke, and approached exercises with a new level of thoughtfulness. The once cocky cadet, who had tried to challenge Sarah Kane, was now beginning to grasp what it truly meant to respect authority, experience, and skill. Sarah watched quietly from the sidelines, satisfied but vigilant. Transformation was not immediate. Marcus still had far to go, but the foundation had been laid. Humility, awareness, and discipline were slowly taking root in a cadet who had once believed himself invincible. And for Marcus, the lessons were far from over. The true test, the crucible where theory met reality, was still ahead. Yet, for the first time, he faced it with more than mere confidence. He had guidance, insight, and respect for the woman who had taught him the first real lesson of his life. Strength is nothing without wisdom, and courage is hollow without discipline. The sun dipped below the horizon, leaving the training grounds in the soft glow of twilight. Sarah Kane's eyes followed Marcus as he ran through one last drill, noting the small improvements, the thoughtfulness in his movements, and the emerging signs of maturity. The journey was far from complete, but the first seeds had been sown. And Marcus Harlan, once reckless and arrogant, now began to understand the unyielding truth. In the presence of someone forged by experience, loss, and discipline, you either learn or you fail. The sky over the Naval Academy had turned a slate gray, heavy with clouds that promised rain. The cadets were preparing for an advanced sea exercise, designed to simulate the unpredictability and danger of maritime operations. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Kane had briefed them on the mission, a nighttime maneuver involving rescue simulations, environmental hazards, and emergency protocols. The exercise was meant to challenge their physical endurance, tactical decision-making, and ability to act under extreme stress. Marcus Harlan had grown in confidence since the gun incident. Under Sarah's mentorship, he had learned the importance of observation, patience, and decisive action. Yet, nothing could have prepared him for what was about to occur. As the cadets boarded the training vessel, the wind picked up, whipping through the rigging and tugging at their uniforms. The waves had grown choppy, and the air smelled of salt and impending storm. Sarah scanned the crew with her usual sharp, calculating gaze. Every movement, every hesitation, every unspoken thought was noted. She knew that the real test of their lessons would come not in routine drills, but in moments of true crisis. The exercise began smoothly, with cadets executing basic maneuvers and coordinated drills. Marcus led his team through the tasks, maintaining composure and applying the tactical awareness Sarah had drilled into him. The sea was unforgiving, yet they moved with a newfound sense of purpose and cohesion. Then, disaster struck. One cadet, distracted by a rogue wave and the physical strain of the exercise, slipped overboard. The alarm was immediate, shrill, and jarring. Panic rippled through the crew. Shouts rang across the vessel as cadets scrambled, some unsure how to react. Marcus froze for a moment, heart pounding. Memories of the gun incident, Sarah's calm authority and her lessons on decisive action surged through him. He had to act. Marcus, assess the situation. Sarah's voice cut through the chaos, calm but commanding. He scanned the water, saw the cadets struggling against the current, and immediately formulated a plan. Without hesitation, he instructed 2 others to throw flotation devices while he prepared to enter the water. Every movement was deliberate, guided by training and Sarah's repeated emphasis on situational awareness. Sarah moved alongside him, her presence steadying the panic around him. Evaluate first, then act, she reminded him. Control your breathing. Control your environment. The waves were violent, battering the side of the vessel and tossing Marcus in every direction as he entered the water. The cadet was panicked, thrashing against the current, making rescue more difficult. Marcus focused, recalling every drill Sarah had imposed, every scenario they had rehearsed. He approached carefully but decisively, reaching the struggling cadet and securing him with proper technique. Sarah remained on the deck, coordinating the team, shouting instructions with precise timing, and correcting minor errors without breaking her calm demeanor. Her experience was evident in every gesture, a perfect blend of leadership, strategy, and skill. Marcus fought against the current, muscles burning, lungs screaming for air. The cadet's panic threatened to pull both of them under, but Marcus applied the techniques Sarah had drilled, maintaining control while guiding him toward the vessel. Every second was critical. The storm, the waves, the weight of responsibility. It all combined into a crucible of experience and training. Finally, they reached the side of the vessel. Sarah and 2 other cadets helped pull the exhausted cadet aboard. Marcus collapsed onto the deck, drenched and trembling, but alive. The team gathered around, breaths ragged, shivering, and wide-eyed. No one spoke at first, a silence a testament to the intensity of the moment. Sarah walked over, her gaze sweeping the group. She spoke softly but firmly. This is why we train. This is why discipline, awareness, and composure matter. Mistakes cost lives. Hesitation costs lives. Panic costs lives. You have faced a real crisis tonight, and some of you failed, while others acted with precision. Learn from both. Marcus, chest heaving, finally met her eyes. He understood something profound in that look, a mixture of relief, assessment, and silent approval. He had acted decisively, guided by training, and had saved a life. The pride in his accomplishment was tempered by the recognition of how easily the situation could have ended differently. The cadets spent the remainder of the night debriefing and drying off in silence, the weight of the exercise settling over them. Marcus replayed every moment in his mind, analyzing what went right, what went wrong, and how Sarah's guidance had enabled him to act effectively under extreme pressure. Sarah, meanwhile, observed quietly from the side. She knew the exercise had revealed the cadets' true characters. Some faltered under stress. Some relied too heavily on instinct without thinking, and some, like Marcus, began to integrate discipline, observation, and courage into their actions. She made mental notes, already planning future exercises, to reinforce the lessons learned tonight. Later, as the storm subsided and the cadets returned to their quarters, Sarah pulled Marcus aside. "You did well," she said simply. "Not perfect, but well. You assessed, you acted, and you controlled your fear. That is what separates a soldier from a cadet." Marcus nodded, exhausted but alert. I couldn't have done it without your training," he admitted. His voice was rough, still catching from exertion and cold, but sincere. "I finally understand what you meant about awareness and discipline. I get it now." Sarah's expression softened slightly, though her eyes remained sharp. "You're learning. But don't confuse this with mastery. The ocean, combat, life itself, They don't forgive arrogance or hesitation. Today was a lesson, yes, but tomorrow may demand more. And when it does, you must be ready. Marcus realized the depth of her statement. The incident had not only tested his skills, but also his mindset. Panic, hesitation, and overconfidence could have been fatal. What he had experienced tonight was a real-world application of every principle Sarah had instilled in him. Patience, observation, courage, and discipline. In the quiet moments that followed, Marcus sat on the deck, looking at the calm sea under a now clear night sky. The adrenaline had faded, leaving reflection and humility in its place. He understood that the real test of his character wasn't in completing drills or impressing instructors. It was in responding to crisis, protecting others, and applying lessons learned under pressure. Sarah watched him from a distance, satisfied but vigilant. She knew the journey was far from over. Marcus had demonstrated potential, yes, but the real measure of a leader comes not in training exercises, but in moments when lives are truly at stake. And the sea, like life, would continue to test him in ways he could not yet imagine. By the time the cadets returned to the academy, the events of the night had already begun to circulate among the students. Whispers of Marcus's decisive actions, Sarah's calm command, and the rescue of a fellow cadet spread quickly. For many, the incident became another example of why Sarah Kane's reputation was not mere legend. She taught lessons that mattered, and she demanded respect through action, not intimidation. For Marcus, the night would remain unforgettable. It was the first time he had faced a true crisis, and it was the first time he had realized the weight of responsibility that came with leadership and action. Sarah Kane had not only guided him through the storm, but had also shown him the difference between fear-driven reaction and disciplined decision-making. As the academy settled into quiet, Marcus lay awake in his bunk, reflecting on the night's events. He replayed Sarah's instructions, the actions he had taken, and the cadet he had saved. For the first time, he understood that the lessons she imparted were not abstract exercises. They were preparation for reality, for moments when hesitation or arrogance could be fatal. And for Sarah Kane, the crisis had reaffirmed her approach. The cadets had been tested in the harshest possible way, and she had seen who could rise, who could falter, and who had the potential to truly learn. Leadership, she knew, was not about authority alone. It was about preparation, foresight, and the courage to act when it mattered most. Marcus, exhausted, humbled, and wiser, knew one thing for certain. He would never underestimate Sarah Kane again, and he would carry the lessons of that night with him for the rest of his life. The following morning dawned gray and chilly over the Naval Academy. Rain had left the ground slick, and mist hovered low over the training fields. Marcus Harlan arrived early, as he had grown accustomed to under Sarah Kane's mentorship. The night of the storm and the cadet rescue had left him exhausted, but also profoundly changed. For the first time, he felt a mixture of respect, humility, and curiosity about the woman who had transformed both his skills and his mindset. Sarah was already there, standing alone by the edge of the training yard, scanning the horizon with her usual intense focus. Marcus approached cautiously. "Lieutenant Commander," he said quietly, I wanted to ask something." Sarah turned to him, eyes calm, unreadable. "Ask," she said simply. Marcus hesitated, choosing his words carefully. How did you get so good at all this?" "I mean, everything. The calm, the precision, knowing what to do before anything happens. I don't think I've ever seen anyone like you." Sarah studied him for a long moment. Marcus could feel the weight of her gaze, as if she were measuring not just his words, but his intent. Then, slowly, she spoke, her voice quiet but steady, carrying the weight of experience and loss. "I wasn't always this way," she began. "When I was your age, I thought strength, speed, and confidence were everything. I thought courage meant rushing into danger without hesitation. I learned the hard way that none of that is enough. Marcus listened intently as Sarah began to recount her past, carefully choosing what to reveal. My brother was a SEAL. We trained together, fought together. I thought I was ready for anything. But one day, during a mission, we made a miscalculation. He died. I couldn't save him, and I've carried that every day since. Her words were heavy with sorrow, yet she spoke with the same calm authority that defined her presence. Marcus realized that her discipline, patience, and vigilance were not just products of training. They were forged in grief and tempered by survival. I survived, she continued, because I learned from that failure. I learned that arrogance and recklessness can kill, and that hesitation can be just as deadly. Every action, every decision, carries consequences. I carry my brother's memory as a reminder that every life matters, including my own, and those I lead. Marcus was silent, absorbing the magnitude of her experience. He had respected Sarah before, but now that respect deepened into awe. He realized that her calm, unflinching demeanor was not simply confidence or skill. It was the result of loss, reflection, and relentless self-discipline. I understand, Marcus said finally, his voice hushed. I think I understand why you pushed me so hard. You weren't just teaching skills. You were teaching me to survive, to think, to respect the weight of my decisions. Sarah nodded, a faint trace of approval in her eyes. Exactly. I don't want cadets who are simply competent. I want cadets who understand the responsibility of leadership, who recognize the cost of mistakes, and who can act decisively under pressure. You, Marcus, have potential. But potential alone isn't enough. It must be refined, tested, and proven. For the first time, Marcus realized that his journey was not just about mastering drills or completing exercises. It was about internal transformation, humility, awareness, responsibility, and courage. He understood that the gun incident, the storm rescue, and every grueling drill Sarah had imposed were part of a deliberate path designed to mold him into a true leader. Over the next few hours, Sarah guided Marcus through exercises that combined both physical skill and mental acuity. They navigated simulated hostile environments, responding to changing threats, environmental hazards, and unexpected challenges. Marcus applied what he had learned, moving with precision, analyzing situations before acting, and making decisions under pressure. Each action was deliberate, informed by Sarah's mentorship and his own growing awareness. During a short break, Sarah shared more of her personal philosophy. You'll make mistakes, she said. You'll misjudge situations, misread intentions, and sometimes fail. That's inevitable. But the measure of a person is how they respond. Do they learn? Do they adapt? Do they carry the lesson forward? That is what separates leaders from followers, survivors from the rest. Marcus felt the weight of her words in a way he never had before. He thought back to the cadet who had fallen overboard, to the reckless stunt he had attempted with the pistol, to every misstep he had made. He realized that every failure was an opportunity to learn, but only if he approached it with honesty, reflection, and discipline. By afternoon, the mist had cleared, leaving the grounds glistening under a muted sun. Marcus and Sarah worked through one final exercise, a complex scenario that required split-second decisions, collaboration with other cadets, and careful observation of the environment. Marcus moved with a newfound clarity, his actions precise and measured. Every decision was informed by both training and reflection. As the exercise concluded successfully, Sarah allowed herself a rare smile. You've made progress, she said simply. Not perfect, not yet, but progress. And that is what matters. Improvement is a lifelong pursuit, and you've taken your first real steps. Marcus felt a surge of pride, tempered by humility. He understood that this journey was far from over, but for the first time, he felt a genuine sense of capability, tempered by respect for the experience and wisdom that Sarah Kane embodied. Before leaving the field, Sarah turned to him once more. "Remember this, Marcus. No matter how skilled you become, no matter how confident, you must never underestimate the lessons of experience, your own and those of others. Life has a way of testing you when you least expect it. And when it does, you must be ready." Marcus nodded, words failing him. He realized that Sarah Kane's strength was not merely physical or tactical. It was moral, intellectual, and emotional. It was the combination of experience, loss, reflection, and discipline that made her formidable. And it was that combination she sought to instill in him. That evening, Marcus sat in his bunk, replaying the day's events. He thought about the cadet he had saved, the storm, and Sarah's lessons about responsibility, observation, and decisive action. He realized that leadership was not about ego or bravado. It was about preparedness, awareness, and the courage to act when it mattered most. And he understood, finally, the true meaning of respect. It was not simply obedience or admiration. It was recognition of skill, experience, and sacrifice, the kind Sarah Kane carried silently every day. In that quiet reflection, Marcus made a vow to himself. He would not waste the lessons he had been given. He would internalize them, apply them, and carry forward the principles that Sarah Kane had so rigorously imparted. He would become the kind of leader capable of protecting others, of making life and death decisions with clarity and composure, and of honoring the sacrifices that had shaped those who came before him. Sarah, watching from a distance, knew that Marcus had taken a significant step forward. He still had far to go, but the foundation had been laid. The lessons of humility, discipline, and awareness were beginning to take root. And for Marcus Harlan, the journey toward true leadership and true understanding of what it meant to never cross a Navy SEAL had only just begun. The final weeks of the training cycle had arrived, and the Naval Academy grounds were buzzing with the energy of cadets preparing for the ultimate evaluation. Exercises grew more complex, integrating physical endurance, tactical decision-making, team coordination, and real-world simulations that tested every lesson Sarah Kane had imparted. Marcus Harlan moved through each scenario with a quiet intensity. Gone was the arrogance of the cadet who had once pointed a gun at an instructor. In its place was a measured focus, the result of months under Sarah's guidance, a balance of confidence, humility, and awareness. The cadets had learned to anticipate challenges before they arose, to communicate clearly under pressure, and to prioritize safety without sacrificing efficiency. Marcus, in particular, had emerged as a leader among his peers. He no longer sought approval through bravado. He demonstrated authority through calm, decisive action and an understanding of the consequences of every decision. His reputation had shifted. Where once he had been mocked for his recklessness, he was now regarded as a capable and reliable cadet, someone others instinctively turned to when guidance was needed. Sarah observed quietly from a distance, as she had throughout the cycle. She recognized the subtle changes in Marcus, his posture, the way he moved through exercises, his measured tone when giving instructions. Most importantly, she observed his judgment. He no longer acted impulsively. He evaluated, calculated, and executed with precision. The lessons of discipline, humility, and responsibility were firmly rooted. One morning, Sarah called Marcus aside. The final exercise would test everything they had learned, a simulated hostile boarding scenario, complete with environmental hazards, multiple threats, and time-sensitive objectives. Success would require seamless teamwork, clear-headed judgment, and the ability to adapt under pressure. Failure could mean the simulated loss of life and an immediate assessment of leadership under stress. Marcus nodded, feeling a mix of nerves and readiness. He understood the stakes, This was not just a drill. It was the culmination of every lesson Sarah had taught him, every mistake he had made, and every moment he had been forced to reflect on his actions. The exercise began at dusk. Cadets moved with precision across the simulated ship, responding to alarms, navigating obstacles, and neutralizing threats with coordinated action. Marcus led his team through tight corridors, issuing calm, concise orders, observing every movement, and ensuring the safety and efficiency of his group. His mind processed the environment in a way that was almost instinctual, yet deeply analytical, a fusion of Sarah's teachings and his own growing experience. At a critical moment, a simulated threat emerged unexpectedly. An enemy cadet blocked their path, creating a dangerous scenario. Marcus froze for a fraction of a second, not out of fear, but to assess the situation. Then, recalling Sarah's guidance on patience and decisive action, he issued precise instructions to his team. One cadet created a diversion, another secured a safety zone, and Marcus himself neutralized the threat, all in perfect coordination. The simulation continued seamlessly, a testament to the lessons embedded in his behavior. Afterward, the cadets gathered for the debrief. Marcus's team had completed the exercise flawlessly. Sarah addressed the group, her voice calm but authoritative. This exercise represents what you may face in real operations. Today, some of you acted well. Others still have work to do. Marcus Harlan, your performance demonstrates the integration of observation, discipline, and leadership. You have transformed from a cadet guided by arrogance to a leader guided by awareness and responsibility. Marcus absorbed her words, feeling both pride and humility. He understood that this was not the end of his learning, but the culmination of a critical stage in his development. He had earned respect, not by seeking it, but by embodying the principles Sarah had instilled. Later, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Marcus reflected on the journey that had brought him to this point. The gun incident, the storm rescue, the grueling drills, and Sarah's mentorship. Every event had contributed to his transformation. He now understood the true meaning of leadership, the ability to act decisively under pressure, the awareness of consequences, and the courage to admit mistakes and learn from them. He remembered Sarah's story about her brother and the loss that had shaped her philosophy. The weight of her experience now resonated within him. He realized that respect was not something granted lightly. It was earned through discipline, awareness, and consistent demonstration of competence and character. Sarah Kane had taught him that strength alone was meaningless without wisdom, and courage without discipline could be deadly. In the following weeks, Marcus continued to lead with confidence, mentoring junior cadets with patience and clarity. He applied the lessons he had learned from Sarah, emphasizing observation, preparedness, and calm under pressure. His transformation became a model for others, demonstrating that even those who began recklessly could evolve into competent and thoughtful leaders through discipline, mentorship, and reflection. Sarah, watching from the sidelines, allowed herself a rare moment of satisfaction. She knew that Marcus had internalized the lessons, but she also knew that real-world challenges awaited beyond the academy. Her work as a mentor was never truly complete. Her role was to prepare cadets for the realities of life and combat, where stakes were far higher than any simulation. One evening, after a final review of exercises, Sarah approached Marcus privately. "You've done well," she said. "Not perfect, but well. Remember, this is not about accolades or recognition. It's about being ready for the world beyond these walls. What you've learned here can save lives, maybe even your own. Carry it with you always." Marcus nodded, deeply moved. "Thank you, Lieutenant Commander. For everything? I understand now. I'll never forget the lessons you've taught me." Sarah gave a faint, approving smile. "Good, that's all I ask." As the Academy's training cycle concluded, Marcus Harlan had completed a remarkable transformation. He was no longer the cocky cadet who had attempted to challenge a Navy SEAL. He was a disciplined, aware, and capable leader, able to make sound decisions under pressure, aware of consequences, and committed to the welfare of those he led. The story of the gun incident, once a source of humiliation, had become the defining moment of his development. It was a lesson in humility, awareness, and respect, a lesson that would stay with him for the rest of his life. Sarah Kane, meanwhile, continued her work, guiding cadets, shaping leaders, and passing on the principles forged through experience, loss, and relentless discipline. For those who had crossed her path, the lesson was clear. You never underestimate a Navy SEAL, because their knowledge, composure, and experience are more powerful than any weapon or display of bravado. And Marcus Harlan, having lived through the crucible of training and mentorship, understood that truth better than anyone. He had been tested, humbled, and reshaped, and he carried the lessons with him, not as a burden, but as a foundation for the future. In the end, the Academy had not merely produced a cadet, it had forged a leader. And the lesson of Sarah Kane, discipline, awareness, courage, and respect, would echo through Marcus's career and beyond, a testament to the transformative power of mentorship and experience. As Marcus looked out over the training grounds one last time, the sun rising in golden streaks over the horizon, he felt a quiet confidence. He was ready. Not for fame, not for recognition, but for the responsibilities that lay ahead. And he knew that no challenge, no storm, no threat, no arrogance could ever again catch him unprepared. Because he had learned the most important lesson of all. In the presence of someone forged by experience, loss, and discipline, you either learn or you fail. Marcus Harlan had learned.